Okay, we will go ahead and get started. I imagine we'll have some more people trickling in here in the next few minutes. Good afternoon, everyone, or morning, depending on where you're coming in from. My name is Bart Purcell. I'm the CEO here at Unizin. And before we get started with our webinar, this is the third installment of our 2025 webinar series. I know everyone might not be familiar with Unizin, so I just want to take a very quick few minutes and go over Unizin at a high level before we hear from our colleagues here from UC Irvine. So Unizin is a nonprofit consortium. We were formed in 2014 by Indiana University, the University of Florida, University of Michigan, and Colorado State University. And when we were formed over a decade ago, the goal was to ensure that academic institutions maintain and control of their digital transformation efforts, and that was predominantly around teaching and learning. We're now up to 16 members. We've added New York University and the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign this year, and this is the largest we've ever been, so that's very exciting. We can sum up our mission as helping our members accelerate student success initiatives through data and affordability, and this comes to light or surfaces through 4 what we call value streams. So our consortium is nearly 1 million students. When you look across all 16 members, we try and use that to our advantage, and we negotiate contracts with EdTech solution providers, and we try and get not only good pricing for our members to take advantage of, but a lot of our contracts also involve those EdTech solution providers providing data back to our members through the Unizin Data Platform, which I'm sure we'll hear a lot about today. The second value stream are our teaching and learning communities. We have 7 active communities. In my mind, this is the glue that really holds the consortium together, where people learn about what their peers are doing at other institutions, draw inspiration, and even collaborate across institutions on different projects. And these communities are made up of people that are in similar roles across the consortium. So you can think of folks in faculty development have a community, accessibility experts have a community, learning tool administrators, learning analytics practitioners, application developers, and so on. In some of our groups, like our application developer group, we even host hackathons from time to time that bring members to a certain campus to work on different technical projects that often rely on Unizin Data Platform. The third value stream we call Engage. This is a digital content program that follows the inclusive access model. So this is where students get access to their digital textbooks or courseware on or before the first day of class each semester. This started in 2017, and we estimate we've saved students somewhere around $136 million since 2017 in textbook costs and courseware costs. So really trying to help there with the affordability. And last but certainly not least is the Unizin Data Platform, or UDP, as we like to call it. This is data infrastructure that brings together data from student information systems, learning management systems, and a growing collection of EdTech solutions out there, EdTech software. And just to give you a sense of scale, in 2024, the UDP across all of our members saw 13.8 billion clickstream events from 19 unique education software platforms come into the data platform. 13.8 billion is a hard number for me to wrap my head around. What that equates to is 450 events per second on average coming into the infrastructure. So a lot of interesting things our members are doing with that data, and we'll hear a little bit about that today. So before I introduce our guest today, I just want to tee up their session here for the remainder of the time together. I've had the pleasure of working in learning analytics now for going on 15 years. And before that, I was in institutional research. And as an institutional researcher, I often spent time working with data sources like student information systems and other data sources on campus. Sometimes we would call institutional researchers BI analysts, the folks here in the middle. And we often deliver reports to administrative leaders in PDFs and Word documents and so on. And as learning analytics sort of matured over the years, we now have a lot of other folks as a part of this work stream, which is great. We have data scientists now working with these data. We have application developers, we have faculty researchers, and we've broadened the pool. We're now able to deliver data to much bigger decision makers that are closer to the students, namely faculty and advisors. But I think one of the things that's missing from this picture is that we don't see students anywhere here, right? And all of this data we're typically using are generated either directly or indirectly by students. So earlier this year, we did an inventory across all of Unizin to see, what kind of dashboards or applications are our members creating and who are they sort of directing data towards. And we identified 19 different initiatives. And of those 19, only two, the University of Michigan's My Learning Analytics and UCI Spark, which you'll hear about here shortly, are designed to provide data back to students. So I think this is an incredibly interesting opportunity space because we have a lot of students out there that I think we could provide data to help inform a lot of different decisions as they sort of shape their curricular and even co-curricular journeys here at our member institutions. So with that, I'd like to introduce our speakers today. First, we have Jeremy Thacker. He is the Assistant Director of Educational and Student Success Technologies at the University of California, Irvine. We also have Ray Vadnais, the Senior User Experience Architect and Product Manager in Student Success Technologies at the University of California, Irvine. So I am going to pull down my share and I'll hand it over to Ray. And while Ray is getting set up, we hope to have a little bit of time at the end for some Q&A. But by all means, I'll be keeping tabs here in the chat. So if you happen to have questions while Ray and Jeremy are going over the slides here, feel free to pop them in chat and we'll get those answered at the end. So with that, Jeremy and Ray, welcome, and I'll hand it over to you.
All right,
Thanks
so much, Bart. And good day, everybody. We're really excited to be here to tell you about Spark, which is just about 1 year old at UC Irvine. Thank you for the introduction, Bart. In the context of Spark, I was the project lead, and Ray was our designer, although that really undersells him. He had a hand in virtually everything to do with Spark. Let me tell you a little bit about what we'll cover. So we're going to start with a demo that'll get you oriented around what Spark is and what we're talking about in the first place. From there, we'll take a step back and talk about how we got up to this point. What was the road that led us to Spark? Then we'll talk about why we made some of the design decisions we did. We'll take a look under the hood. We'll talk about how it's been received by the campus and then tell you about what is next for Spark in terms of what we plan to develop in the future. Lastly, we'll talk about how Spark might be able to come to your campuses, and we hope to leave some time for a healthy Q&A at the end. So crossing my fingers that we move quickly enough. With that, I will hand it to Ray, who will give you a demo.
Yeah, always risky live demo. Thank you, Jeremy. I realized that I never sent my updated headshot along, which is why my LinkedIn profile from 20 years ago was used. So I used to look like that, but not so much anymore. So I'm going to go ahead and do a quick demo of Spark, and then we'll dive into the rest of the content. I know we have room for Q&A at the end. If there's any questions along the way, put them in chat, and we'll see if we can weave those into the presentation as well. Otherwise, we'll answer everything at the end. So this is Spark. I am currently logged in as a student on one of our test servers. You'll notice a bunch of data is blurred out. We have a feature in Spark that lets us present it in a secure way, so the name and ID and most of the enrollment stuff is blurred out for the student. We're currently in week 2 of our fall quarter, which is leading to this experience you see here today. So when a student first logs into Spark, they see their dashboard, which includes a variety of sparks that are generated based off data, which we'll get into. Quick links to their course analytics features, favorite sparks that they have. They can click this little heart icon to favorite things to come back later. The very first time they come to the tool, we have a little tour that they click through. This was added at actually the request of students to kind of orient them when they log into the tool. We didn't have this at first, and this is helping with our initial onboarding and our initial engagement strategy around the tool. And they can watch that tour at any time if they decide to come back to it. If you've been to earlier presentations about Spark, you may recall we used to have a pre-quarter questionnaire that was required. We've stepped back from that. We noticed there were, I don't remember what the exact completion rate was, but it was under 30% of students who saw that questionnaire actually filled it out and got to see the dashboard. So we're trying a new thing for fall where the questionnaire is optional. They can still take it if they want to. If we don't have it enabled on our stage server, it is on our production server. They still take it if they want to, but they don't have to. They can get their dashboard right away. If they do choose to take it, it does provide us with useful information. We ask about which services on campus they're interested in at a high level, like academic advising, student outreach, that kind of thing. How often they use those services, and there's a free form question about how we can better support them, so they can just kind of provide us with less structured data. So this is the dashboard against the primary interface. It's updated weekly, alongside all the student activity scores that we use to calculate a lot of this stuff under the hood, which we'll get into again. We also have the comprehensive Spark library. This is all the resources in the system sorted in different ways. We have by category. They can search. This was also requested by students, so they could go through and find resources that they were interested in. Search for writing in the writing category. That probably doesn't help, but maybe the Center for Excellence in Writing Communications does. So they can kind of whittle it down a bit. They also get a history view to show all the sparks they've clicked with some fun visualizations, a personalized view based on their algorithm, and then their favorites. And course analytics is where they can go in and view analytics on their courses. Unfortunately, we're in week 2. We block out the analytics to display until week 3. So we have enough data to make it interesting. So I'll show screenshots of that when we get to that part of it. This is the area of the tool that we're building out the most. And when I went to set for the demo this morning, I realized that we were at just the wrong time in UCI's quarter to get there. We start way later than the rest of y'all for the most part. We also have a bunch of admin features, which we'll go into since we are interested in sharing the system with universities that are interested in onboarding it. So we have a variety of tools to help us run the system better, including the Masquerade feature I'm using now, which is like Canvas's Act As feature, as well as the demo mode. We also include, and I'm pretty sure we don't mention this anywhere in our presentation, Jeremy, but we also include Canvas integration. So you can access the system either directly through spark.uci.edu, or students can log into Canvas, and on the sidebar, we've injected a UCI Spark link right there. So they can click that, and that will get them into the system, which has been our largest driver of traffic since we launched the system. And I think that covers the demo portion. Again, the dashboard is kind of the primary interface. This is where we're spending the most effort. We just launched a substantial redesign of it to bring in UCI photography. This is one of our bridges in our very green campus. We highlight the quarter with little icons. Every quarter has a specific color. We cleaned up the sparks to make them pop a bit more. Students complained the colors were a little muted, so we saturated the color palette. So we've done a lot of work on this dashboard to hopefully make it a more inviting experience for students. The last bit of the tour is this little help widget, which is on every page. This tells them what's new in the tool so they can see what we've done, a link to our website to learn more about it, access our support system, and then submit feedback. So they can do this on any page in any context. It has a little wizard workflow that works them through the process, and then it'll get their content to where it needs to go. So we're trying to be very open and transparent in getting them to also become members of this community to help us build Spark through these sorts of feedback mechanisms and surveys and other things that we'll touch upon. I think that's it. Jeremy, is there anything else I needed to demo?
No, that was good.
Good, cool. Now let me jump
So,
ahead past my emergency demo slides. There we go.
right, perfect. So now that you have a sense of what Spark is, let's take a step back and talk about how we got here. So we have an initiative at UC Irvine called Compass. It started up about a decade ago, and it's really built around making what was previously really siloed data all around campus much more integrated and much more available to campus stakeholders to drive data-informed decision making. So we actually started with academic advisors and then started expanding things out to include academic administrators, to include instructors. And as we were slowly growing out this Compass umbrella to include more tools, more audiences, more governance, we added a student data warehouse that stitched all this data together. All this was going on. We eventually realized there was one really important campus population we were missing that Bart was talking about earlier, students. We didn't have anything for students. So we thought, why should they not be able to take advantage of data-informed decision-making as well? So that was kind of the beginning of Spark. So we knew we wanted to have something for students, but the question was what? There were two kind of contextual factors that we wanted to think about when we went into deciding what would an analytics application for students look like. So one was the high diversity of UCI. Compared to a lot of other large research institutions, we have extremely high diversity. We rank highly consistently in listings of like high diversity institutions. We have a lot of first generation students. We're a recognized Hispanic and also Asian American and Native Pacific Islander serving institution. So when you're talking about analytics, sometimes they can paint a picture of like what the averages are or really normalize things. But on our campus, we actually want to do is go the other way. Because these backgrounds, experiences, needs are so diverse, we want the data to bring out the differences and to help provide more targeted information to individual students to give them a information that speaks to their unique set of circumstances as opposed to something that's more normalizing. The other contextual thing is that we, at least in our shop, approach things in terms of design thinking when we're trying to decide how we want to build out a tool. For those who are unfamiliar, design thinking is an iterative process through which you really center the user in terms of what you're making and their experience. So it's a 5-step process, more or less. You kind of move back and forth, but if you were to go straight around the ring, you begin with empathizing, which is understanding the lived experience of your users, in our case, students. And that can be done through interviews, surveys, analytics, all kinds of data sources to understand what their lived experience is and what their needs are. From there, you define or translate findings into clear problem statements. Like in our case, one problem statement would be students can't easily find support resources on campus. From there, you ideate or brainstorm solutions to using cross-functional teams. So we might bring in student success experts, designers, software developers, data analysts, to all kind of pitch around ideas about how we might address those problems. You move on to prototyping or building small testable features. In our case, we tend to focus on a minimum viable product. What's the smallest thing we can put out there, be useful, and have people get their hands on it. Then, of course, testing, having people actually use the thing and seeing if it works. So once they're using it, once it's in the hands of students, we can measure their sentiment, we can measure impact on retention, course completion, engagement, all kinds of different measures to see how it's actually playing out and whether it's doing what we hoped. And then from there, you feed back into the loop. You know a lot more now, so we're able to reanalyze the problems again, able to come up with new ideas to further what we're trying to accomplish, and so on round the loop. So it really is a long living iterative thing. So with all that context in mind, we set about understanding our student body, really empathizing with their needs. We did a lot of generational cohort research. So looking at Gen Z as a whole, we learned that they tend to want immediate feedback. They tend to be very visual. They like graphics. They like data information presented in visual ways. They are both self-reliant and collaborative. So things that kind of bridge the two are really appealing. They value self-care, so they have like a really broad view of what success and wellness is. And they tend to be self-serving when it comes to looking for answers before asking for help. So they're inclined to go on their phone and try to find what they're looking for before they seek, expert guidance. We also talk to students on our own campus to understand what makes them unique. Through focus groups and interviews, we learned a few interesting things. One thing that stood out to us was a lot of them mentioned the big park that we have in the center of our campus. You can actually see a picture of it in Ray's background. It came up several times, kind of organically, and we thought it spoke to a sense of well-being and wellness and student experience that was broader than just academics and grades. Like they enjoy being able to engage with their environment, being able to unplug, being able to immerse themselves in their space. There was a lot of desire for personalization that was reflected in some of their preferences for the apps that they tended to use in their day-to-day life. We noted that UCI provides a lot of services which our students recognize and appreciate, but it took them a long time to find them all, if they even did find them all. They'd have to be on campus a while before they really had a sense of what was out there for them. So with all this information, we assembled a set of guiding principles, things that would be kind of our tent poles for what we wanted Spark to accomplish. One was to encourage, to show that good habits lead to good outcomes with modeling of activities by successful class and course peers. One was to support by directing to just-in-time resources based on interim activity deviation from baseline. And the third was to inform or make pathways to time-sensitive and just-in-time resources clear, intuitive, and obvious. A through line through all of this was self-determination, letting a student decide what their goals were, what they wanted around well-being, around success, and to give them information that would help them self-actualize that. Our fourth tent pole was do no harm, which is basically a recognition that this is really novel. We're introducing a lot of data that students haven't had access to in the past. We didn't want it to be inadvertently demoralizing or to have them gamify the data in ways that were unintended and potentially harmful. So we needed to make sure we were also being thoughtful about how this would impact the student experience and be really watchful of that when we first got it into their hands to make sure it wasn't having unintended side effects. So with all of that in place, we went on to do even more connecting with our community. We connected with students through ongoing one-on-one user research and testing of like small prototype apps and things like that. We did co-design sessions working with our School of Education where they helped us figure out what feature sets might look like. We did quarterly user surveys once it was in their hands, so we have a ton of survey data that's evolved over time. And we also connected with subject matter experts. So we had a whole work group built around designing Spark that included lots of folks. I'll talk more about that in a second. We had meetings with many partners and stakeholders, and we met with researchers around campus with expertise in pedagogy, in student motivation, in nudging, all sorts of things. So speaking of connecting with campus, we had a lot of meetings with campus partners through roadshows. We met with just about everyone under the sun, but this ended up being a really healthy exercise because what it did was it helped us get build buy-in and support from the very beginning. Everyone kind of had a sense of what Spark was. So when it came time to ask for help, oh, we could use an expert from your area on this, they already knew what it was. They're always like, oh yeah, that's great. Here, connect with this person. But it also let us get ahead of any concerns that folks had. We realized that this is a novel application that's doing things like using data beyond traditional silos, exposing some learning related data that hasn't really been used before. And it approaches student support in a way that's built around self-determination and that's like personally data driven, as opposed to providing kind of traditional one size fits all academic guidance. So we wanted to really listen for concerns around those kinds of themes. And I'll note that we actually didn't hear that much in the way of concern. A little bit, but mostly people were just very on board. But it really took a conversation to get them there because at first glance, you might make a lot of assumptions about what Spark is. And we found that having that conversation helped us all get on the right page. So this was a really important step. I mentioned that we had a working group around this, the Empowerment Library Work Group. This was over 20 people who we brought together from many different parts of campus, academic advisors, there was a student in the group, we had junior staff, senior staff, all kinds of people. And they helped us brainstorm through what Spark might look like, what content should look like in Spark, what would be motivating instead of demotivating, and to identify all these different resources around campus that we could pull together to push to students and how we should identify which students to push the content to. They were extremely instrumental in making this not just an application that had enough content, but had the right content to suit a really diverse student body with lots of different needs and niches. So ongoing engagement with students has happened from there. I talked a little bit about some of the co-design sessions and focus groups that we had, but once Spark was in people's hands, we also did a lot of outreach via in-person events. We've been out there during the summer at our orientation, giving out stickers and telling people about Spark, giving out QR codes so they'll go and visit it. We've been continuing to receive survey data as people go out and use it. This has been really instrumental in trying to maintain student energy and engagement around it. We'll talk a little bit more about that further on into the presentation. So what all this kind of yielded was this community-oriented approach to designing Spark. And one example of that is the Sparks themselves. So each of those little resources that you see, oh, Ray, next slide, please. Each of the little resources that you see on the dashboard, we call a spark because we hope it sparks the student into some action, but each one represents a resource. So the Empowerment Library work group that we had was really instrumental in designing this out. We ended up, for example, having a category on each one. We have 5 different categories: learning and studying, connecting and engaging, preparing for the future, well-being and thriving, and writing and communicating. Because what these categories do is they help emphasize a broader sense of well-being, something that appeals to our Generation Z cohort, and says, hey, there are different parts of your student experience, and these are different things that you can use to have that rounded experience, to have a rounded sense of wellness. It helps students find the things that they're most interested in too. So the tool doesn't just become hammering you over the head with study skills. That's in there too, but this helps demonstrate what the point of the tool is and helps people find what's most valuable to them. So with that, let's talk a little bit more about how this is all played out in all of Spark. I'll give it back to Ray, who will take a deep dive into how it all works.
Thanks. I want to go back really quick and point out 2 things, which I had not mentioned to you before either. For each of these Sparks, we also want to make sure they all have this call to action. They all lead to a campus resource or a website or an action that they can take. We have a new type of Spark where we can embed novel content, we're calling it evergreen content, directly to the tool. So if there's some long form narrative thing that a unit doesn't have a place to host, we can host it within Spark now using this new thing that we've built. But for the most part, these all take them off to other offices, which is why those partnerships are so important. I also want to point out on this slide, the UCI Spark is most of the team is actually UCI alum. Jeremy and I both graduated from UCI. One of our senior developers, Justin, right here, also is a UCI grad. So a lot of this is built by, we say built by UCI for UCI. In a lot of cases, it's really built by UCI because we all got our educations here as well. But jumping to what I'm supposed to be talking about is how the thing works. So underneath the hood, and this is where we have our first big mention of Unizin, which has essentially made this tool possible. You don't want to understate the value of the UDP or overstate. I want to mainstate it. This tool is possible because of the UDP. If we didn't have the UDP, we would not have embarked upon this journey. The amount of data that we're pulling into this from Canvas and our SAS, we don't have the staffing, or we could develop a skill set, but we don't have the skill set baseline to do the things that we're empowered to do using Unizin and the data platform and the data marts that are underlying that. So Spark itself relies on the UDP, which of course relies on two core systems here, Canvas, which we're all familiar with, and the UCI Student Data Warehouse, which is essentially our proxy for an SAS. UCI we just turned 60, I believe, this year. I think it's our 60th anniversary. And our registrar systems are nearly that old. They use COBOL and other fun things under the hood, and they're modernizing them, but there are a lot of old stuff under the hood, which has made some integrations challenging. Our student data warehouse has greatly streamlined that. So all that data flows into the Unizin Data Platform, which then is used by Spark to do various things. We do a lot of usage logging in the system. That helps us to monitor what's going on. It helps us to see what students are doing, see what Spark students see if they're getting diversity of Sparks. So we do a lot of logging in the background to do service enhancement and service measurement. We also pull in some data from external systems. The Spark resource library is a spreadsheet that gets uploaded. That's what populates the Spark library. And we actually just started pulling in data from our career center. We use Handshake, which is a pretty popular vendor. I don't know how widespread it is amongst Unizin members, but I understand it's one of the main players in the market. I have a slide that talks about our strategy there and how we're trying to keep that agnostic. But we take all this data, and we don't just show the data to students raw because that would be weird and not very useful. Instead, we synthesize it down to the Spark suggestions, individualized Canvas analytics based on the various data marts, which are really useful, and future features that we're still discovering, that we're learning about as we share the tool with folks outside the university as well as with our students. The next few slides are going to be basically a more detailed version of the tour. I'll try to not be too redundant. But we have our dashboard, which I already mentioned. It's updated weekly. The Sparks displayed are based on data profiles. The way we do that is every week we go through every single Spark. Every Spark has a set of criteria, which I'll show in a moment. Or a few moments. The Sparks, the criteria are all scored. We tally up all the scores, and then we show the top scoring Sparks to students. It's a pretty rudimentary algorithm right now. It relies a lot of sort of gut feeling. It'd be nice to have a more holistic process that's backed in evidence. As we deploy this tool and keep using it, we're going to shift in that direction as we gather more data and engage our campus researchers. We're also interested in using AI to maybe help with some of that processing as well. But that's how it works right now. And again, we store all of this. We show the top 4 matches, but we're actually storing all the matches. So we have a For You page that they can see the rest. That was requested by students because they'd see these 4, and the really enterprising students wanted to see more. So we built the For You features so they could see the other ones that were related to them. We have our comprehensive library, which I went into, and I went over all the features in the demo. We have lots of different ways that they can view this. The search feature, we didn't actually have at launch. That was requested by students, and we added it in. The history feature is our first part of what will maybe one day be like a Spotify year in review type feature, where maybe sometime during the academic year, we can show them all the things they did in Spark and all the cool resources they discovered that they may not have discovered otherwise. Or maybe we'll expose that data back to the business unit so they can see, their broadened reach because of their partnership with our team. We have a lot of ideas on what we can do with all this data under the hood, as long as we're, of course, being sensitive to student privacy and their rights around that. So anything we do share is aggregate and anonymized. We have our course analytics. So I showed how they get into these, but we feel that the course analytics are one of the really cool features that students aren't necessarily discovering because it's not on that homepage, right? They don't see a chart on the homepage, although we might add one on. We talked about that to whet their appetite. But we do have quick ways they could jump into them. We have the sidebar widget, which shows all their courses and they can get into it. And then we have a course analytics homepage that shows the courses as well. We do show all the courses, whether or not they're in Canvas. We found that if we didn't show the courses that weren't in Canvas, students were confused because it looked like their courses just didn't show up. So if they click into that, it just says that it's not using Canvas, so we don't really show them anything useful. Unless a Spark happens to match that course, then we will show the Spark for that course. So if they have a writing class that's not using Spark, but we have a writing Spark that matches the course, we'll show that writing Spark. I realize I use a Spark in a bunch of ways, so hopefully that made sense. Whenever they first go into a course, before they see anything, they have to actually do some goal setting. And this is to help encourage goal setting itself is just a really good best practice to help students kind of think about what their goals are in the class and can help them to actually achieve those goals. They're required to choose a goal grade. We really carefully thought about the thresholds here. We ended up choosing A, B or better, or pass. We're not going to let them say they just want to skirt by, although I guess pass is kind of that, although that is a great option at UCI. We also don't want them to say they want to fail a class because that would be weird. Why would they take the class in the first place? But this can really help them to help us later on as we, use this data and help them to better choose where they want to spend their efforts. Maybe there's a GE class they want to do fine in, but they really want to focus on their research lab for that quarter. So this lets them kind of tell the system which ones they care more about, quote unquote care. Of course, they care about everything equally, but without really using that sort of potentially overly nuanced verbiage. We also let them choose an overall goal for the class. This is free form entry. This is just so they can kind of think about what their goal is for the class. Eventually, we want to synthesize this data and present it to instructors. Again, generative AI would be a great way to do that. So the instructors can see what goals their students have. We see to hit a critical mass of students to make that feature useful. And we ask how prepared they feel for the class. Again, we want to show this to instructors at the end of the day so that they can ask. That's a pretty common, question that instructors are curious about is how prepared students feel they are, regardless of, previous courses they've taken. When they've taken and filled out all these forms, then they get our access to the course analytics. So we're currently showing 4 different visualizations. The top 2 are pretty much the same information. It's activity per week. We're using one of the data marts that feeds into the student activity score data mart for this. So we're not showing the comparative, the quartiles, octiles stuff. We're just showing the raw score that goes into it. The reason being that we're not doing comparative analytics yet. That's a future thing we're embarking on. We want it to be opted when we do go down that road. We're trying to be as thoughtful as we can in how we approach it. But we wanted to give them something interesting to look at. And since it's just for the course and they're not looking over courses, this raw activity scores seem to be something that we could show so they can at least see what they're doing and when they're doing it in the course. So we show the first chart is that activity per week. The second one is the change in activity, either positive or negative. Excuse me. Then we show their assignment submission trends. Apparently, I picked a student who turns everything in on time all the time for my screenshot here. But this will also show if they turn in work late or if they have missing assignments inside that category, or if they have things they haven't turned in at all because they're not due yet. We're using another data mart for this one as well. So it bins things into their contribution to the final grade. So large, major, unweighted, small, different categories on how much they're worth. We did briefly talk about wanting to show early submissions here. There's a correlation between turning in work early and doing better overall in the course. We chose not to do that because we have a number of students who maybe don't have the opportunity to turn in work super early. We didn't want to demotivate them. So imagine students who have, students who are parents or students who are working a job or two or supporting their families. Sometimes it's a struggle just to get things submitted on time at all. So that's where we're focusing on right now. Eventually, maybe we'll let them opt in to show more detailed analytics if there's something that they're comfortable doing. I will also show this is our newest one, an activity heat map, so they can see when they're active in the LMS for the class. The darker the purple, the more active they are. This student here was awake at 2 a.m. on a Friday for a little while for their class. Poor student. But we show this so that they can really help between all of these things here. It's really to help them understand and see data and evidence about what they're doing in the class. It's not how they're doing. There's no grades information here, but it's, are they turning in work on time? Are they spending time in the class when they think they are? Maybe they say, like I only study for this class twice a week in the afternoons, but really we see here they're logged in Monday and Wednesday mornings and really early Friday morning. So they can maybe, think about how they're studying and their study habits and shift that around. We are also providing this information on why it matters, so they can see that's information help them contextualize. We're not just showing them the data, we're showing them information about how to use it. And eventually we'll start adding in reflective questions so they can kind of use this data, ask themselves, what does this mean? What can I do with it? I don't have a great example off the top of my head of a reflective question for this, but that's what we'll be adding into here. We may or may not let them enter the answers to those. It could just be a thought exercise, but we'll go from there. We also have little bits that say everybody's circumstances differ. If you have any, late stuff, talk to your instructor. Don't get demoralized by that. So we spent a lot of time on this. We're also taking a project on right now to potentially rethink all these analytics now that we've had them out for a year and really consider how we're showing them to students. We also have a variety of backend admin features. So pretty much show the main core feature set, right? We have the dashboard, the library, the course analytics, and that is essentially Spark from the front end. I'm going to dive in now and show some of the back end stuff so that you can see how the system is actually running, how it works. We have a variety of admin features. This lets us, I showed these before. This is the menu that was more blurred out. This is my information we're seeing here. But you can see, you can act as a user. We have the demo mode to blur things out. You can manage terms. We've built in features to also let you fake the time of the year. So I did say before in my demo, it's not a great time to do a demo. I could have played with the system a bit more and made it pretend it was last spring in week 7 and shown it that way. If I had thought to do so and made sure that it worked. There's one or two features that don't work with the mock mode, so but we're working on that. Oh, there's also a way to view all the criteria, which is helpful when we're assembling Sparks, and we're building out these admin tools over time. We also have a separate analytics app that we're using to really dive into the log table that we have. It's a very comprehensive logging table. And this is where we're pulling out all of our metrics. So Jeremy will talk about adoption in just a couple of minutes here. But this is where we're pulling out things like our daily active users, our quarterly, which is measuring our usage over time, our quarterly active users, which is measuring our capture of students within each quarter, and other important things there. So this is one of our tools that taps into our data backend. I had mentioned before that we're pulling in career center data as well. So we're doing this in as thoughtful a way as we can and with an eye towards campus portability. So we use Handshake. Handshake generates daily reports. We're transforming those daily reports into a series of date-based fields. So we track when a student logs into Handshake. What was their last login? When did they start their profile? When did they complete their profile? When did they last meet with a career counselor? When did they last attend a career fair? We feel like these are pretty generic activities or actions that it feels like a career center system would probably have in them. So we're hoping that if other campuses do adopt it and want to feed in career center data, or if eventually the UDP has a provision for doing this down the road, I know it's adjacent to the LMS, but we will have ways to hopefully integrate all that data together. You can see here, these are various criteria. I know it's a little small. These are the Handshake criteria, and then they match the different things that I mentioned, some point values and other backendy type stuff. Just more exciting technical details under the hood. Spark itself, I just have one slide on this, but if anybody has more technical questions, I'm happy to answer it either after this or in a future meeting. But Spark itself is a Microsoft .NET application built on .NET Core 8, which is the current long-term or the current LTS version of .NET Core. We keep it up to date as that framework releases new LTS versions. We have a local database called DB Spark that is a Microsoft SQL server that's hosted in Amazon RDS. Alongside our student data warehouse. DB Spark is where that Handshake data goes into. The Sparks are in there, the logs are in there. The data needed to run this system that's not UDP data is in there essentially. We don't connect to our STW directly at all. We only connect to the UDP for as much data as we possibly can in the local database. So UDP is where we get all that learning data, all their courses, their enrollments, their roles, all the session data, and all that kind of stuff comes straight out of the UDP. Authentication is controlled through Shibboleth, so that's our authentication system of choice at UCI. And I think that got all my bullets captured there. So we tried to make it as easy and portable use as possible, although it does have some tech dependencies. The Windows server and the is probably the main one there. It doesn't have to run in the cloud. We're just running it there now. The early versions ran on premise on-prem hardware. And with that, I will hand it to Jeremy for user reception and feedback.
Yeah, so let's talk a bit about how it's gone in the last year that it's been on campus. And I'm going to try to move fairly quickly because we want to make sure there's time for Q&A at the end. And if you want to delve deeper into any of the details, we're happy to do that if you have the interest. As we said, it's been out there for about a year. We introduced it in summer of 2024 in online composition classes. So kind of that do no harm approach and that early prototyping approach. We wanted to get it in a small group of students' hands at first, really watch it closely, make sure it was okay, and then scale up. So in summer, with our writing classes, it went very smoothly. So then we expanded it in fall quarter of 2024 to first year and gateway transfer gateway courses. So these are like the really big classes that have a lot of students that are new to UCI in them. Think like a lot of the first in a series GE courses. We work closely with the instructors on that. That went very smoothly. So we decided to go into general campus availability in winter and spring. And that was really huge because at that point we were able to embed the Spark link into Canvas, making it easier for students to find it and kind of be reminded that it exists. So that gave us a big spike of usage. So all throughout this, we continuously gathered data from the students who were using it, and also students who weren't using it, and we've been driving product integration or iteration based on that feedback. So as for the different parts of campus and how they felt about it throughout, administration has been extremely positive. They're very enthusiastic about it. We've had very few concerns from administration. They've been very helpful in connecting us with services to bring in more resources into Spark and to build out those partnerships. And they've been really supportive of sharing it with other universities, just like here, so that we can get the word out about this tool and see about potential expansion in the future. In terms of faculty, mostly very positive. They like what we're trying to do. They kind of see how it fits in. There were a handful of folks, literally I could count on one hand, who had like specific concerns around course data use or potential impacts on students. But we found that like by sitting down with them and having conversations about like how we're actually doing it, hearing out those concerns and those things, that's been more than enough to, address them. I will say that engagement from instructors overall has been fairly low in that they're warm to it, they're happy to hear about it, but they haven't been eager to directly engage or promote it. And from what we've heard, a big piece of that is instructors are not generally inclined to put their name on something that hasn't been proven. So like they're not building it, they heard about it, it seems cool, but does it work? So hopefully as we have more data behind this and we can demonstrate the positive impact it's having more clearly, we'll be able to get more instructors more directly promoting it to their classes or engaging in content creation and curation, that sort of thing. But our most important audience is students. For this, we set up some key performance indicators. So like targets of what we hoped it would accomplish, that when we could measure those things and see is it actually doing what we want it to do. We set up 5 different categories, and these are built around those pillars that I introduced way back at the beginning of the presentation. One was impact, or is it making a positive change in students' experience? Promotion, is it driving students to engage with the campus offices that we're promoting? Reach, are students actually going out and using it once it's available to them? Stickiness, if they've used it, are they coming back and using it repeatedly because they're getting that value? And then representation. We want to make sure that it's serving all of our different key demographic groups equally, that it's not, in an uneven way serving, say, students who aren't first gen versus students who are first gen. So hopefully it's like in line with what our campus distribution is on those groups. So how it actually went. We did really well on impact and promotion. This is based on survey feedback that we've been getting from students. You'll notice promotion dipped a little bit in our second quarter. That's because we changed the way we were asking the question. We thought that 40% seemed really high, so we got more specific in our question, and it did take a dip, but it's actually still on target from what we were hoping to do, so that was good. Representation is really strong, especially by the end of the year. We were like right alongside what the campus distribution is for all of these demographic groups. Where we've been having a harder time is reach and stickiness. Spark is optional. No instructor is making you use it. It's there in Canvas, but students are busy. They're focused on their classes. They have jobs. Getting them to go out and proactively seek the support has been hard. So a little more on that. We found that really key to getting students to use it is active promotion and outreach. Ray, you can go ahead to the next slide here. The rate that students visit when we actively promote is much higher than when we don't. So looking at like the little diagrams on the right side there, the first pair is spring versus fall for daily users, and the right pair is average number of interactions per user. Again, spring versus fall. In each case, the numbers for fall are much higher. The difference is in spring, we experimented with doing very little outreach and promotion, and in fall, we're doing a ton of outreach and promotion. You can see all the things we're doing in the lower right corner there. We're out at events, we're putting it in specific courses and having instructors promote it there. That makes a big difference, but it's not necessarily sustainable to have an ad campaign at all times promoting Spark. So one of our key goals as we go back into that design thinking cycle is to figure out ways that Spark can be kind of more organically self-motivating and generate interest and repeat usage from students based on the kinds of features we put there, the way that we drive students to it, and that sort of thing. So with that, I'm going to give it to Ray to talk about some of what we have planned in that vein.
Thanks. I'm gonna do the exact same thing I did last time and back up one slide before I go forward. One thing that's interesting about stickiness in particular, and actually a lot of the KPIs, we didn't make up the numbers off the top of our head, but KPIs at a certain level are kind of made up, and then you measure and then you adjust them based off of that. One thing that we thought was interesting was stickiness, and we actually went out in our last set of surveys and asked students how often they expected to visit the tool, and found that most of them said once a month or once a quarter. So we kind of expected that number to be a little bit higher, but it turns out that maybe with the current feature set, students were visiting a little bit more in line with what we'd expect. So that is just an explanation about some of the numbers we're seeing here. So going forward to future enhancements. So this is what we're looking at doing to build out the tool, and these are our key priorities there. We want to increase usage, which is obvious based off of our KPIs. I want to empower students through the addition of comparative analytics, better individualized analytics, and expert guidance, reflective questions. I mentioned that before. And we want to continue supporting healthy habits through some study planning features and things like that. There's also the well-being category that we had in our Sparks. As Jeremy mentioned, UC has a giant park in the middle of it. Lots of students just said, make a Spark to tell people to go take a walk and get out. And I think the current term is touch grass, although maybe that's a derogatory term. I'm not hip on my Gen Z slang there, but that is one thing that we want Spark to do is encourage students to put down their phones, go outside. We have a beautiful campus, go walk around it. As a remote work, it's a little hypocritical of me, I suppose. So on the study planning features, we have a couple ideas here. One is the study plan builder, and I will try to speed through these. This would take the average number of hours that you should be spending per class studying. This is based off Carnegie units and all that kind of fun stuff. And then let students basically fill in the non-lecture time with different activities to support their studying. So of course, there's always going to be some part of independent self-paced studying and assigned work, doing homework and writing your papers and stuff. But there's also study groups. We have a tutorial center called LARC. There's discussion sections which may or may not be mandatory. There are other things on campus that they could take advantage of, maybe meeting with their friends who are in the same major and just kind of all group study things there, even if it's not a focus study group. In addition to letting them say how much time they want to spend on these, we also want to give them best practices. So how can they effectively use those study groups? How can they effectively use office hours, things like that? So we're not just saying go to office hours, which is one thing people say it works, but students don't want to go to office hours because professors are, I mean, speaking from experience, scary and unapproachable, and I don't know what to say to them. But if we can give them guidance and maybe a little tips on how to use it, how to use this effectively, maybe more students will leverage those activities. So that's something that we're excited to build out in the future. This would be per class, but then we're looking at building the next logical feature, which is a weekly study planner. So this will be a weekly view. It would take those various activities that they've said they want to do and now make them schedule it out. Once they've scheduled it out, they're kind of committing to themselves to do it. It's more likely they'll actually do it. We'll also show their courses that they're enrolled in so they don't accidentally say, I'm going to study during my math class. We'll let them add on other things here if they have to work or if they're in clubs and organizations or if they just want to take a brain break and play video games or whatever, go play football. They can, block all that stuff out on this feature as well. On our old LMS, when we had a homegrown system, we had a very similar weekly planner feature that was pretty popular and widely used. We lost it when we moved to Canvas in 2015. But I think this is a great opportunity to bring back this feature and integrate it with the study hours. Even cooler would be if they could then share this with their academic advisors so that they could work with their advisors and other student support services to build out their study plan. We are building a new advising system on campus, a homegrown one, so we're hoping that we'll be able to integrate some of these features into that. But this would be part of this at least would be part of the core feature set for Spark. We're also looking at expanding the library. We're always eager to add more Sparks. We just added 18 Sparks, excuse me, from our career center, and we're about to add some more Sparks from our counseling and wellness center. So we're constantly on the lookout for more Sparks to add to the system. We have a process that we've designed around that to help units provide thoughtful Sparks to the system. We'll also continue looking at the algorithm. Students also want to know how we're calculating which Sparks they see. We're a little hesitant to show them all the data under the scene. There's another principle of Spark, which is don't be creepy. If we show all that data, it looks a little creepy. We're using it for good, but We want to be thoughtful of how we're showing those to students. We also want to make it easier to add Sparks. Right now, a programmer has to go in and upload files and stuff. It's a little bit annoying. So we want to have ways that a non-technical person can manage those Sparks. I also mentioned before, we're looking into comparative analytics. One of the ideas there is we would use the grade bands that they've chosen based on their goal grades of or B, B or better, or pass, and then show them what students who earned those grades in the past did. What was their activity like in this course? What did they do? How often did they turn in quizzes and other things like that? So that's where we're still investigating what we want to do here and the best way to pull the data out in a performant way. It would also be nice to look at third-party tools. Data that maybe is in the UDP, that'd be great. But we have most of our third-party tools we found at UCI aren't in the UDP yet. So maybe there's APIs they provide that would let us extract data out of that system, of those systems. We also want to improve our data and dashboard, so more data under the hood. We pulled in handshake data. Our campus uses a system called Campus Groups as our student engagement platform for student organizations. So we want to pull in data from that as well. We're also looking at incentivizing usage via badges. So Jeremy and I are both video gamers, so this one comes out in this one. But it would be neat, if you've logged into Spark X times or over X weeks or access certain features in times, to let you see a little badge that you can see. We're tentatively calling our badges Sparkles because that's a little cringy, and we think our students will like that. And the book, or the thing that tracks all of your Sparkles, is the Sparkle book. So, in one of the older versions of this presentation, I had a slide on giving Spark a personality, which I kind of wish I'd put back in retrospect. But that's one thing we're trying really hard to do, is not make Spark just another university web app that we're shoving at our students and telling them to use. We want them to want to use it and have a little bit of fun using it and think like, oh, this is neat. I can't believe UCI built this. Staid university built this fun, whimsical web app for us to use. That's one of our goals in the system. And I think that probably is a reasonably decent segue to the next slide, which is Jeremy.
Yeah, I would say so. So we've alluded to it a few times, but we've been building Spark to share. We really aspire, especially for the things that are building on what Unizin is doing, to make them things that we can contribute back to the community. And that Spark is one of those things. Spark, Ray talked a little bit about the architecture earlier. It is built on .NET and MS SQL. So, the ability to host that kind of thing would be a prerequisite if you wanted to adopt Spark in your location. But all the services that it connects to on campus, I'm going to get a little technical here, so indulge me for a moment, and then we'll pull back out of that. Everything is built around interfaces. So in theory, if you have a .NET team, they could go in and they could adapt the connectors, so to speak, to talk to whatever systems you have on campus. In theory, you could even have it work with a system other than the Unizin Data Platform, but that would be a much heavier lift. For folks who have the UDP, it shouldn't actually be not too much effort to just plug it into your UDP and then add, say, SSO integration and that sort of thing. Out of the box, it works with Shibboleth, but you could implement whatever you wanted. We're working towards compatibility with synthetic data in the UDP, which would make it so that it's easier to kind of experiment with at your location. So that's coming soon. So with all that said, what does sharing look like? We haven't really decided yet. Again, we're into design thinking. We want needs and user experience to guide what we do. So we really want what people are interested in to steer where we put our efforts towards sharing. So this could look like lots of different things. It could look like open sourcing it. It could be as is code sharing via like campus to campus MOUs. We could host it. That would probably be at some kind of cost to support the hosting, but then it could be like a hosted service. It could just be idea sharing. If you want to meet with us and talk about what we did on Spark and draw deeper inspiration for the things you're working on, we'd love to do that. So however we can contribute back to the community in a way that serves you, we'd be interested in hearing about. So that takes us to our contact info. Do feel free to reach out to Ray and me. You can email us at spark@uci.edu. That's our inbox for the project, and you'll reach both of us. You can get more information about Spark itself by going to that link. We'll drop that into the chat. So a lot more info out there. We left a few minutes for Q&A, so let's go ahead and answer any questions that folks have.
Great. Thanks, Ray. Thanks, Jeremy. You can unmute or you can drop a question in chat, whatever you prefer. We have a few minutes for a couple of questions.
While people build up their courage, I'll mention we did get a question from Heather in the chat about office hours Spark resource and where it links to if it embeds content in Spark. All of our current Sparks link out to external resources. Generally, it's going to be more information on the topic or a next step. If we're like motivating them to engage with like a program, it might be like the intake for that program. The Ray mentioned briefly Evergreen Sparks, which is the new thing that we just added. Those do allow for embedded content that's like fully formatted. It can contain links and other kinds of formatting. So there are both options now, but at the moment, all of our stuff links out.
So while we're waiting, I'll ask a quick question. I know in the past we've had a member that had, I want to say it was experimenting with student-facing analytics, and they actually brought a psychologist in to help with the wording, right? In terms of how to word things in a very intentional, motivating, inspiring, right, kind of way. I'm just curious if you've, how you've thought about specifically the wording, right, that appears on the screen for the Sparks that are student-facing.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Ray.
So in terms of like specific people, we brought in our School of Education research partner, who I think we should probably name, but I forgot his full name off the top of my head.
Oh,
So
Professor
Jeremy,
Jim Hahn.
thank you. So that's one of his specialties, is this sort of analytics and making these sorts of useful dashboards for students. So he's provided us a lot of guidance around supportive language and usage. We've also been building tools for our campus for 20 years, so we have a lot of experience just making sure that we're not saying the wrong thing to students at the wrong time. But yeah, that is definitely part of our do no harm. A lot of the language that's gone into it is very intentional. It's very much designed to be supportive, non-judgmental, not lead them down the wrong path to your conclusions, inadvertent conclusions. So that's one of the core design principles in the tool. When we can, we try to cite research or foundational articles so that people who want to dive in more can dive in more. And of course, students are always welcome to email us to ask or comment on things. Accessibility is another key component of the tool, so we're complying with all the various accessibility standards, WCAG 2 point whichever, AA, and I don't think we've gone for AAA. The color contrast for AAA is a little harsh for the tool, but we may strive for that. We also make sure it works on mobile devices. So it's a web app, but it flows really nicely on mobile phones. So it scales nicely from a mobile phone to my giant desktop monitor.
I'll just add that the Empowerment Library work group that we worked on initial development with was hugely helpful in figuring out how we should frame things, how we should phrase things. Lots of experts from all over campus and various disciplines there. And we actually ended up building out a set of like properties or values that we thought would make Spark content effective. So we did that for the initial batch of content, but we've been able to use that same template and work with our partner units as we go out to say, this is how we like to see these things phrased. This is how we like to see them presented for these reasons. And that's really helped us keep everything kind of in the same tone. And all the feedback's been positive in that regard. So it seemed to work well.
Great.
Yeah, our staff from our tutoring center, our Learning Academic Resource Center, have been really helpful with the language and the fine tune. They're really sensitive to how things are framed and worded for students, given the type of students they support. That makes sense. Students who need that tutorial.
I have a question. At Nebraska, we have some introductory courses where it's really about onboarding students and we're giving them some of these resources. So I'm imagining I could incorporate something like this into the course. And then ideally, there's some way that I can grade or get feedback on usage to say, do this, and then I know you've engaged in it, and maybe it feeds me something as an instructor. Any thoughts on that, on the way you could formally incentivize at least initial engagement in some kind of onboarding course and give feedback to an instructor that, yes, this person has satisfied the requirement?
During our first fall quarter pilot, we did that. So if an instructor wanted a participation list, we had we had more surveys that they would require their students to do. So we provided them with participation lists that way upon request. I expect if we had we have similar courses here, we call them our University Studies 1 series. If we had instructors who are interested in that, we could provide them with that sort of participation information. I think that's an interesting thing for us to pursue. I could also see, one area that UCI does an okay job is providing instructors with analytics, but right now it's focused on grades and demographics. I want to take a lot of this stuff about Spark and also expose that to instructors. You know, what are the goal grades? How prepared do the students feel? Are they even using the tool? You know, as more students, it's almost a chicken and egg problem, right? Maybe that would help instructors want to encourage usage of the tool, but until people are using the tool, the data is not interesting enough to show instructors. So yeah, I like the idea of maybe piloting with our uni studies courses to help with usage.
Yeah, automating that bit's a really neat idea. And actually,
Yeah.
University Studies is promoting Spark this quarter actively, so they have content. But yeah, there's not that kind of feedback loop there. So that's a neat idea.
Great. Well, thank you again, Ray. Thank you, Jeremy. We are a little over time, so I appreciate staying a little longer. And we'll button this up and put this up on YouTube and send a note out once it's there to all the attendees. So thanks again. Hope everyone has a good rest of your week.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.